Hi, hello, welcome to Next Gen Visionaries. Today we have with us Vinuta Ralapalli, CEO and founder of the Funding Office, a unique platform that supports Indian startups, incubators, and early stage funds. Vinuta has a front seat to what is really happening in India's startup ecosystem in the last decade. Her team consists of people who have actually run incubators, managed funds, and built startups themselves. We'll discuss everything from unicorn obsession to the Series A crunch, government schemes, and what it takes to build a sustainable startup today. I'm so excited about this conversation, Vinuta, with you. Welcome to our show, and so thank you so much for taking out this time.
Thank you, Saujanya. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
So I see a lot of structuring on the board. Is it a funding structure that you're doing for your startups?
Oh, yeah, that's all the secrets there. so,
We
yeah,
are
we are.
definitely zooming into it.
Yes, don't give it away yet. Something really exciting that I'm building is right there. So, yeah.
Super, super. Very
But anyways, that
excited to
brings
know.
me to the point, Saujanya. We have all these startups or a lot of people who are very secretive about their ideas, right? So my initial light bulb moment when I started working with startups is when someone told, if you're going to hide your idea, then there's no point in even trying to build a startup. So that was back in 2011 in London, and I was very surprised because until then, confidentiality is one of the things that we are taught as chartered accountants. So it was very surprising for me when I heard that. But then later I came to know that execution is really the key, right? You might have 1,000 ideas, but until you're able to execute, it's not going to mean much really. So yes, by all means, have a glance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apart from execution, the grit to go on with the story. It is not one light bulb moment, like you said, one aha, right? And a lot of people might have the same aha. But are you passionate about building it? Why do you want to build it? All of this makes who we are. And my first question is actually that. I wanted to know, when did you decide to get into this space of helping startups? First of all, startups is a risky business. You are building on top of a risky business, another
Yeah, yeah,
startup. So,
yeah.
how did this idea strike and where was the beginning?
So the beginning was in 2012. I'm not kidding you. It's actually in 2012. So if you're calling it risky to get into startups now, then I was just mad. Because I was a chartered accountant, and obviously CAs are supposedly very smart when it comes to these decisions. But I just fell in love in 2011 when I was working in London with startups. And I don't think there was one aha moment. It just felt so fulfilling to do this as against what I was trained on. I mean, of course, I was a CA, worked in Big Fours, did the audits, did the diligences, all of that was very nice work. But when I started working with entrepreneurs, I learned so much on an everyday basis, and it became like an addiction. And I think that was the start of that aha moment, and it's just going on aha, aha for all these years.
It's quite a long journey, man. 2012 is 13
Yeah,
years now.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
wonderful.
13, 14 years now.
I think society has trained us to be calmer, quieter, composed, and being able to put ourselves out there and being able to put our skills out there. As entrepreneurs, it is compulsory for us. Whereas in a job, your talent gets recognized over a closed group. But as entrepreneurs, like you rightly said, it is very critical. And imposter syndrome is a real thing, and it is the stats prove that it is higher in women.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, from your perspective, what do you see startups in India heading towards? So, for example, you have seen the scenario in London and other international locations, and whereas in India it is a different ball game. I mean, we are quite a densely populated country. Even in startups, there is a lot of volume. There are so many startups today. How have you seen the whole ecosystem of startups evolve, and how do you contrast it with your exposure in the international areas?
So, Saujanya, first of all, I think my international exposure will not be really valid anymore because that was a decade and
Many
a half
years ago.
earlier. And even London was a very, very small ecosystem. I used to work with an online accelerator And we used to have about 3,000 startups across Europe, not just from UK. And when I came back to India, we had 400 startups in Hyderabad. 400. And we literally knew them by name. You know, we knew all the good ones by name, and we have built the connections back then. Some of them are doing very, very well now. But over the last 10, 11 years, especially since 2017, since Startup India has started, I think there is a phenomenal growth in the sector. I mean, nothing would have prepared us. I mean, for somebody who's an early entrant into this ecosystem, this was a dream that, you know, everybody understands what I'm doing. Because for a lot of people early on in my career, I had to dumb it down and say what I do. I used to just say for ease of things, I used to say I'm in fundraising business. And my dad used to be in fundraising, so they thought that I'm doing fundraising for large projects, etc. I wouldn't even bother to explain that no, I'm doing only 1 crore fundraise. So from there to now, I think it's a phenomenal leap. We are 1.6 lakh DPIIT startups that are incorporated in India today. And what is the most beautiful thing is it's not restricted to the Bangalore, Delhi's, and Mumbai's or Hyderabad's of the country anymore. You have great founders coming from tier 2, tier 3 cities. I know a whole bunch of amazing men and women founders who are now coming from these tier 2, tier 3 cities and actually are building for Bharat. And I think that is a phenomenal success of our ecosystem. And like you very rightly said, Saujanya, it's very densely populated. We are a big country with a lot of cultures, a lot of mindsets. So to be building in India, it's like they say, right? If you know how to drive in India, you can drive anywhere. So it's very similar. So if you are built in India, then I think you get the superpowers to be able to do a lot of things anywhere.
So, like in startups, the advisors, the fundraisers, and the lawyers who are advising startups are also in volume. So, like you, I have been in the circuits in different forms since 2010, and I see that anybody and everybody gets into this. There's a lot of noise. Startups also get lost. On one side, they are saying, startups are saying, we are the people who are starting these companies and launching it and convincing the investors and all of that. On the other side, they need advice and support and all of that. And this advisory space is so complicated to navigate. So, what have you learned from this, and how are you trying to remove that noise in through founder's office? So, I would like to understand your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So the funding office is here especially for that, Saujanya. I have probably advised most startups against the mentors that they brought them to the table rather than advise them to go with them. Because like you said, especially in the last 3, 4 years, there's just a lot of noise. And when you are choosing a mentor, the most important thing is, are they aligned to they might be very experienced, they might have 20 years on their CV. But until that they are aligned to what you are building, it's not going to really make a lot of sense, especially because founders also have very little time. So if I had, say, all the time in the world, then, having an expert on my side who's probably from a completely different field still makes sense, because I can delve into their intellect, into their wisdom when I observe them on a daily basis. But that's not how most mentor-mentee relationships are. I meet them for an hour and, I'm supposed to give them out all the gyan. But if I'm not aligned to that sector, if I have not invested in that sector, or if I have not understood that sector deeply, or if I have not built in that sector, the chances that I can meaningfully contribute to your company will be less. So that's when I sieve through the requests that come through, right? That's one of the things that is very striking for me. And in fact, mentoring has been one of the spaces that I've been most actively involved since 2012, whether it was with TiE Hyderabad back then when we created the mentor model for the TiE Hyderabad, or again in all my roles across from APIS or Vadvani Foundation, and most prominently in T-Hub, when we had like so many people wanting to be mentors, so many people wanting mentorship. So the matching becomes very, very important. And mentor matching is not just about your CVs, right? If you and I have to listen to each other, mentor, support each other, we should have a vibe going on, right? In the Gen Z terms, vibe, chemistry, whatever you call it. We need to have that. Because unless you feel that, okay, I want to listen from this woman, or I feel that, I really value what Saujanya is saying, let me learn from this, it's just going to be noise. right? So finding that right mentor is like one of the first big boons that you're going to get as an entrepreneur. And there are now a lot more ways of doing it. But one part that I want to, given this platform, I would like to tell entrepreneurs is a lot of people come in with asks of equity, right? Advisory equity and all that. So the only thing that I always say, I mean, funding the office, I think if you walk in, you will hear this in the first day conversation somewhere, is that when it comes to equity, behave like your life depends on it, because it does. The startup life depends on equity. Whom they are giving, how much they are giving, for what are they giving. Every one of these points is very important. So even if you want to give advisory equity, it has to be tied up to certain milestones that the mentor is delivering for you. At the end of the day, it is a transaction. There has to be a give and take, right? So all of these things become very, very important, especially given that if you are going forward for a fundraise for your next rounds, if you have given away too much equity to a lot of people, then you just become unfundable, right? If there's too much dilution early on, then your funding prospects fall very, very drastically. There's nothing that you can recoup from that, right? So that's the part that I kind of very actively tell all my startups about.
I know you're wearing your investor hat when you say that. I get that. How do you balance the three pillar strategy that you have? You have startups, you have early stage incubators, you have early stage investors, all of them on one platform. So, what is your giveaway to each of them, and how are you balancing expectations from all of these three
Yeah.
parties?
Yeah. Sajanya, very nice question. Thank you so much for asking that. I don't think any of these work in isolation, right? Investors, with all the might and fury that we might have, we are nothing without the good startups to invest into. And incubators, we sustain and we live pretty much for the startups, right? So our startups are the central hero of this whole plot. And when it comes to startups, one of the main reasons, or one of the main thing that used to irk me a lot when I was sitting on the investor side of the table, is that these great founders, great backgrounds, and all of that, right? But when it comes to their decisions around compliance, used to be all over the place. They would not have a clue about what is there, what is not there, and all of that. So those are the things that really used to, kind of hurt me a lot as an investor. So compliance is one big pillar when it comes to our startup operations. The second thing is fundraising strategy. How much to raise, where to raise from. A lot of startups end up diluting way too much, way too early, raising unnecessarily huge amounts sometimes. Or sometimes they go onto the road only to raise like something that will go for 6 months, the runway that will last for 6 months. Either of these are very dangerous, because you're unnecessarily diluting yourself, or are going to be troubled with another fundraise in 6 months. So investment strategy is basically to figure out how much to raise in this current round, which will sustain you for the 18 to 24 months timeline, right? To be able to convince an investor that you have it in you to build to that 18 to 24 months timeline is the challenge that most startups face. So we start with approaching what would be your fund requirement, what is your goals, what are your goals that you want to accomplish, and then back work into what is it that you need to raise, right? So the second
Yeah.
big pillar that we work for is on your financial, or the financial and investment strategy for startups. So I don't, of course, I do a little bit of other mentoring here and there when I'm really in love with the startup. But otherwise, I try to restrict myself on the financial investment strategy, and of course on the compliance part of it. We have an in-house compliance team. I have chartered accountants, company secretaries, legal folks, because I'm kind of obsessed with all of these. Of course, with the background of CA, I think that's guilty of that. But a lot of mistakes can be avoided if you have good support early on.
Very true, because in my experience also, I've seen great startups, very well, highly qualified founders failing in spite of having backing of good investors, just on the basis of compliance and being clean with respect to finance. Not even clean, they're clean, but they're not properly documented.
Yeah.
So, in the rush of the startup, in the rush of this whole activity, they're just not taking care of basic things like governance and compliance that can come back and bite you, like you rightly pointed out.
And I
There is
also think
nobody
it's
in the system who. There is a lot of misguidance in the system that also ignores these aspects. You're like, okay, you're making 1 crore of revenue. It's okay if you don't file this for now. These kind of wrong advisory, misguidance also is there. So
Yeah.
what you're doing is really important.
Thank you, Sajanya. So from the incubator's point of view, high attrition is one of the biggest problems, right? A lot of people who are working in incubators eventually go on to start their own startups or want to join other incubators, larger incubators, or go to funds, etc. So when people keep moving, the relationships that they build also will keep moving with them. And investor relations is one of the biggest critical factor, which generally just goes away with the person. So that is one of the things that I want to target and work with to help investor relations be with the incubator through a platform that you see in the background there that I'm building right now. Apart from that, incubators also sometimes or most times will not have the bandwidth financially and otherwise to be able to afford a full-time person to give the right guidance with respect to fundraising, compliance, financial strategy, etc. So that is also some place where funding office, with my experience of over 13 years working in this space on all sides of the table, I can bring in that expertise as a consultant and kind of deliver on those sessions. I have in fact built a program called Conviction to Capital, which is a 3-day boot camp in the truest sense. They come at 10 o'clock in the morning and are here till 8 o'clock in the evening, where they're drilled through their entire financial model, their pitch narrative, which is not much talked about. It is the story, right? It's the story that is the hero. It's not the fancy slides. Today you can use Gamma or some other app and make the slides like that. But it's not the slides. It's what's the story that you are actually here to build, and how are you personally inclined to that. That is what I'm very proud to say, that I'm an expert at helping design. So that's the part that we do for incubators. And for investors, today there are over 1,000 plus VCs that have set up. When I started in this career, I would know all the people, all the VCs at a partner level, right? So most of them have now since retired also. But a lot of people that I will work with are now at a partner level. But the thing is, now the number of investors has gone up really, really high. So it is still the same bunch of deals that they're all after, right? So for them also, being able to find those, especially early stage deals, is a challenge. After the early stage, they have multiple channels. But early stage, there's obviously a lot of noise coming from across the country. So how do I provide a very curated deal flow where this is not just coming that I got a deck and I will send? In fact, I never make connects like that. I have to work with the startup. I have to refine and get them ready for it. Only then do I make any connects. Obviously, I get a lot of backlash for that from the startups. But that's the only way that I want to sustain quality when it comes to bringing really good, deal flow to my investors.
Right, right. Lot of investors I know have this challenge of plenty of proposals and going through the filtration and
Yeah.
finding out what is suitable. Especially every investor comes with a thesis. There is a fund, there is an expectation in terms of where you can invest, where you can't. Right? So clearly understanding it is also a big job. Like you said, there are thousands of investors, everybody has their preference, their funding cycle. So have they recently raised? Have they closed their round? Are they waiting for exits? All of this is a lot of information. So how are you channelizing all this information and making sure this matching occurs between the incubator, the startup, and the right kind of early investor?
So for investors, especially, is where the platform play will really come in handy, Saujanya. But for now, the way that I work is I don't think platforms will ever replace human connections, right? So it is understanding each fund's thesis, the fund lifetime, like you explained very well. There is a time that they invest actively and they are in that rush to go through the investment over a period of 3 years. And typically the maturity or the harvesting is for the next 6, 7 years, right? So understanding where which fund is in that funding mood, right? So is the most important thing. And of course, sector matching, thesis matching. And another thing that I do is the founder matching. Given that some of the funds, at least I know the personalities and how or what kind of companies that they have invested in the past, it gives me a good idea that, okay, this founder has this characteristic, so this might work for this fund. So currently, because of those very customized, very in-depth work that I'm doing. I work with a very limited set of startups at any given point of time. So they first have to go through my curation where I look at it and I say, if I had the capital lying around, would I put money into this startup? And only if it goes through my, investment lens do I even pick up the mandate for the startup.
Right, right. Makes sense. I think that reduces a lot of effort both on the fund side and also on the startup side. So that's quite interesting to know the work you're doing. Some of the questions that always kind of made me curious in the startup arena is what I'm going to ask you now. So, lot of Andhra Pradesh, from where we are, AP, Telangana states from where we are, have always been entrepreneurial. Like, for example, the first irrigation projects were actually given to Andhra promoters.
Yeah.
Pharma, IMRB, and all of these initiatives have started to companies like Dr. Reddy's and Aurobindo Pharmaceuticals quite early back in the day. And in their own time, they were entrepreneurs. In their own time, in their own way, they were entrepreneurs. So, but this whole thing about funding have made startups look for growth at all costs. I mean, has become a thing, kind of an occupational hazard to go after revenues and forget about the fundamentals of the business. So, what is your experience been? Growth at all cost kind of mindset, and how startups have been impacted. Startups with growth at all at all cost kind of mindset have been impacted during funding winters. We had 23, 24, not so great in terms of raising investment. So, did that ecosystem go back to fundamentals of the business, which is profit driven, cash flow driven, or they remained to focus on growth at all cost kind of mindset? That was the question.
Great question, Sarjanya. And yes, it is a very disturbing trend when that happens, but I think everything is cyclical in the world, right? And there has always been those spurts, and of course, the recent one is what we have seen in 21 post-COVID, a rush to invest anything and everything. I wouldn't call it, yeah, I think it's a winter, basically what happened over the last 1.5 year. I think more and more investors are now going for more fundamentals, and this is what even my personal recommendation at all, all platforms that I work with is don't please build the companies for the investors, right? So please don't build anything for the investors. You build a company and then it may be investable by VC money or it might not be, but you build something that is purpose driven for you, that makes sense for you, right? And yeah, it is quite disturbing when I see a lot of very early founders have absolutely like zero capital, right? And the examples that you gave about yesteryears, people would put their own stake first. They would sell the land, they would do whatever it takes. Or, they would struggle first for 1, 2, 3 years, make it slowly, and then, they would go for the next stage. Any story that you take, I have personally had the privilege of working in the GMR group, so I closely, kind of read about what they have done and how they have become a 20,000 crore company today. And it did not happen overnight. It was a legacy that was built, over decades. And that's how, older businesses actually are. What is beautiful and what is both a little scary is how today some of these tech companies are valued much more than companies that have been built on strong fundamentals, on strong impact that they are creating through jobs created or many other ways that they are creating both impact for people in their own circles as well as the external world, right? So a lot of these tech companies, the valuations are just, mind boggling, right? How can something that we consumed for the last 20, 30 years be less valued by far means to an app which is just helping you put creators together, right? So that's the world, that's the reality that we are living in. And for my advice for startups would always be, please don't chase valuations, don't chase money like that. If you are fundable, then absolutely by all means ensure that you have everything in place to make yourself fund worthy. But if you're not from one of those sectors, don't try to force fit yourself for funding sake. That's my that's my take on it. And yeah, it's a scary trend because a lot of things are not glamorous enough for people to build anymore. but they're actually solid businesses to build. They're businesses that you can leave a legacy with, leave for your kids, etc. So I think it is cyclical. It will this whole thing will also kind of come to its senses very soon, and in a lot of ways it has come, and there is of course scope for much more correction to happen in the market.
Yeah, I think this kind of mature advice is something that is missing in the market. I'm glad that through your funding office, you're bringing in this kind of advisory and awareness among the founders, because a lot of people get impacted or impressed by the way we are celebrating unicorns today, and they think the startup journey is about becoming a unicorn. Not all startups need to be unicorns, and they can still be valuable businesses, right? So that kind of maturity that you're building is something that is lacking in the system, and I'm glad that somebody is picking up that aspect and talking about it.
On a lighter note, I would like to
No.
share this with you, Saujanya. I was sitting in an airport, and there was an elderly gentleman with a very young boy of some 2021, right beside me. And both of them look like from tier 2, tier 3 cities, don't have like a lot of finesse in the overall, like whatever I could sense, right? And the older man asked the younger boy, okay, what is a startup? So the younger man's response, who looked educated and probably is doing his degree or something, his response is, you start a company and people invest into you. So that has become the definition of a startup. And I was like, my God, this is what is the problem, right? Yeah, funding happens as a byproduct. Somebody is seeing great benefit of putting money into you so that they can make money. It is no charity, right? At the end of the day, I might really love you as a person, but I'm not going to invest into you if your thesis is not matching my thesis. If you are building something which is a lifestyle business and not going to give me 100x return. As an investor, I'm taking money I'm going with my bowl to a lot of people to bring my fund together, right? And when I do that, I'm promising them the moon and more. And I have to deliver on my moon and more promises. Until then, I'll not be able to raise my second or third round, right? So I'm going to be super calculative about how I'm going to pick up my startups and why there's potential in a particular startup. In fact, investors are okay even if you make it as like a zero return. But if you're going to show them a 2x, 3x kind of a return over the next 5, 7 years, that doesn't interest them at all. And you will be surprised, oh, these guys don't want to invest in companies which are sustainable. Because that model was not built for those kind of investments. Yeah.
That's correct. It doesn't match their return expectation at all.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there are a lot of government schemes that we all see, right? A lot of DPIIT recognitions, fund of funds, SIDBI schemes. A lot of support is being created by the government. What has been your experience being in the early stage startups? What has been the benefit of all of these funds and support systems, infrastructure created by the government? Or has it been too much of bureaucracy and the same hype? Or has it been a real support for startups?
Short answer is I think it has been a boon for the Indian startup ecosystem, Saujanya. I think it has been a boon. Because a few years back, I used to always directly say that, boss, India mein to risk capital is very, very low. So don't think that somebody is going to come and put in that first check of 10, 20 lakhs. That's not going to happen. You figure out where the 20 lakhs is coming, your savings, your parents' savings, friends and family, I don't care, but you bring in that first check. I think that is the critical gap Startup India really filled with the Startup India Seed Fund scheme. And I think that is one of the most beautiful schemes that has been implemented in India in the last few, like 2017, 18. And I was lucky enough to be part of that discussion when we were finalizing the terms of what that scheme is going to be. And what is more fulfilling, as an ecosystem person is, of course, there will always be bad players, and all of that is always true, right? There will always be people who would have misused that money, etc. But a lot of startups that I know have benefited from that. That has given that 20 lakhs, that 10 lakhs has given them that initial push to be able to go to the next level in their journey. And this was what was really missing in the country, right? And government coming in and filling up for that, and that also giving the authority of managing it into the incubator's hands, so that to a large extent, the bureaucracy of having to go through like 100 things is now reduced. Can it be
Right.
better? Absolutely. Anything can always be better. It could have been better. I mean, it could have been a little bit more simpler, could have had better stringent, policies or internal controls in some cases. All of that from my CA head, these things are natural. But I think as a scheme, I think it was a grand scheme. It was just 995 crores of capital. But I think the kind of confidence that it gave early stage founders was much more. And I don't know if I don't know if it is official, but we are looking at something much bigger coming from Startup India Seed Fund Scheme. And I'm very excited about the potential that that is going to cause. We are at right now 1.6 lakh startups, and a lot of them are, still working it out. I think the next things that are coming from the Startup India house are going to be very exciting. But that's not the only scheme. You have a lot of other schemes. A lot of government departments have their own individual schemes. MeitY also has their own different funds. They have Genesis, they have Samrid, they have multiple different grants as well as investments that they do. A lot of defense department example has like their own, and animal husbandry has certain funding. So I think these are great because one side you are getting the government buy-in, right? Once I see the government as an investor or as a stakeholder, then obviously as an investor, my confidence that okay, this is seems to be approved, right? So that's a very good push. I think government is doing. We used to talk about startup Chile, a few years back, like saying, "Oh wow, what an imagination to be able to come up with that." But I think startup India or India as such has beaten a lot of expectations and has been able to deliver a lot of good to the Indian entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Like you said, just investing 1,000 crores so creatively and encouraging a full generation of youngsters to start off, to not get scared of starting off, like letting go of craze for a job and just being trying to make their own business stand up is something phenomenal. Like you rightly pointed out, there are rough edges, there's a lot of work to do in terms of evaluating how that money is getting repurposed, becoming sustainable, becoming reused over and over
Yeah.
again. Right, so there's a lot of homework for all of us to do in that space in terms of how to efficiently use it. So, going forward, looking ahead, these are things that we have discussed about the current things and what you said about great things happening in the ecosystem. I'm very curiously waiting and watching to all the announcements that are going to come our way. From your point of view, what is the next wave that's going to be? We have seen agri-tech, fintech, SaaS wave. Even before that, we have seen dot-com wave. So, what is the next big wave that you are seeing, and how do you think the startups are prepared for it?
So I think right now it's the the wave is already waving. We have a lot of AI going around, obviously, right? AI has disrupted the world in many ways, and whether it is harmful or whether it is useful, only time will really say. But I think implementing AI across all these domains that you touched upon, I think that's going to be really the next wave. For example, AI in agri tech, right? That's going to be like a how do you purpose a technology for something which creates impact is where personally I think I'm more aligned to see. I'm very excited to see what is going to happen where we can use AI for good, and there's a lot of work that's going on. I am very particularly excited about the use cases within the health, medtech devices. This space is again super exciting, right? Precision medicine. Um, until now, you and I would take the same Dolo, and it would work on you, not work on me. Dolo is a very small example, but you know what I mean, right? So
Yeah.
that precision medicine, all of this is possible at scale with AI, and that possibilities are super exciting. I think AI holds a lot of promise beyond making sweet pitch decks and recreating of photos, which I use a lot. But beyond the entertainment value that AI delivers, there is a lot and lot that can be done, and I'm very excited to see how these different industries are going to adopt and build different kind of verticals as vertical AI platforms or a lot of implementation across sectors that have social impact is also something that I'm super excited about.
True, true. All of us are eagerly watching the space and seeing it unfold.
Yeah.
However, what we have seen in AI is the top of the iceberg. Very, very little, right?
Yeah.
The capabilities that we have seen today are actually very, very minimal to what actually artificial intelligence promises.
Right.
And with this little so much, entrepreneurs are able to do magic. And I wonder, I often wonder, what are they going to do when really the AI is going to hit,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what kind of impact it's going to be, and maybe in our lifetimes we're going to see that change as well. But
Absolutely.
what are some of the crazy problems that you deal with in evaluating AI startups, AI enabled startups? Because there is, I mean, I've seen startups build superb solutions, and the next day I open Claude, they have a feature doing the same
Exactly.
thing. What happens to the startup that's been built over the last 6 months? So how do you evaluate AI startups, and how do you make sense of them in this ever evolving overnight wonder that is unfolding in front of our eyes?
So I think one is all the deep tech things that are building on top of LLMs, or things that are really on the hardcore tech part of it. Obviously, are exciting, right? In improving models that exist. One of the things that I came across is regional languages, or pronunciations. Things like these are, of course, exciting and investable. I would say, I mean, based on a lot of other factors, which remain the same, which is the grit and conviction of the founder. Do I really find that this founder is going to make it, and all of those. Those, I think, very very core things of any investor. But I think anything core AI will are looking exciting still for investment. But core AI development will take a lot of money. So does this founder has the ability to sell himself to be able to raise that money? Will be my biggest question. You might be an amazing tech guy or tech girl, but unless you have that ability to be able to scale, that's where again my will come in. Um, a lot of other tech for industries, right? I don't think this is something general AI will be able to replicate in a very short span, right? Whether it is a Claude or whether it is ChatGPT or any of these, I don't think they should touch these things, right? So I have a startup which is, for example, solving for how do they make particular industries' life easy by integrating an entire workflow through AI and making it super intuitive. And that is being built by somebody who's a domain expert, has built a company in this space for 10, 15 years in that same domain. Now, the kind of expertise and experience that he has is not something that AI will have, right? AI hallucinates a lot. AI makes up whatever it wants. There's a lot of issues also with AI. So, will I take it seriously for work? I don't think so. I would still rely on my own pen and paper and my calculator when I'm say doing a valuation, calculation, or just good old Excel for now. So I think there is space for very specific applications being built for specific sectors. That's a space that's still alive and active. And again, like we touched upon the whole healthcare space or agri-tech, which are very core domains, and which are our roti, makan, kapda kind of things. All of those also needs AI intervention. That will happen, and that will be built by amazing entrepreneurs who are coming from those sectors. And I don't think that can be something that can be manufactured somewhere in the US and be implemented in Rajahmundry, right? It has to be personalized to every geography. It has to be built by people who actually struggle with that problem. So AI is not a solution for everything. AI is a technology, just like everything else before it, right? Like you very rightly pointed out, there was a dot-com, then there was a time when we all talked about big data. And it used to make me feel like very confused because I couldn't understand what's, big data. Yeah, okay, fine, but how does it really, right? And blockchain was another one, which I am very honestly admitting that I don't think I understand blockchain or cryptocurrencies that much. So there are a few technologies which have really, really, put us in a much better place, and AI is one of those.
Yeah, yeah. No, I like the way that you are breaking down, deconstructing the complexity of AI and looking at the fundamentals. I think that's a great approach to take when evaluating startups.
Yeah.
Just have one question which I have not covered. Um Why is there a lot of chasm after the initial round of funding before Series A? Why is there this whole crunch in investments, the startups going for a Series A? What do you think can bridge that gap?
I think now you have a lot of pre-series A funding available. You have a lot of bridge financing options. Um, I think the fundamentals, Saujanya, still remain the same. If you're able to deliver on your promises that you have done in your seed round or pre-series A round, I don't think you should have, unless the market has violently changed in some, against you in this time. I don't see that as such a big problem anymore. I mean, personally, I have not encountered a lot of my startups go through that struggle over the last 3, 4 years. I'm talking about. Before that, yes, absolutely, we had like a proper struggle. Now, I think the problem still rise with very early stage funding. The seed funding is still a struggle to get that first check because you have everything that you're doing, somebody else is doing. So there is absolutely no uniqueness in anything that you build. So then you're basically selling your own capability to build that, right? And that takes time to prove. I cannot start today and expect you to believe me as an investor tomorrow, right? So that is the crunch that 6 to 12 months or 6 to 12 months is good. That 12 to 24 months when you're struggling by your own, I think that is the toughest time for an entrepreneur.
Okay, so most overrated startup advice you heard.
Most overrated startup advice that I have heard. 1 second, give me a second. I'm just weighing 2 or 3 options there. Most
I
overrated,
don't mind. I don't mind hearing two or three.
2 or 3 different options. You have to be part of an incubator is one of the things, and you know you can figure out compliances later. I think that's when I want to give that face punch. I think that's the one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct. Um, what is one quality which is very underrated in a founder, but you find it the most essential?
Perseverance and kindness, both the qualities. And I know it's not what is the most. I'm sure if you were asking male investors, it would be a complete different response. But I think for building a long-term business, these are two qualities that you need to bring to the table.
Yeah, perseverance is straightforward, and we have also touched upon it during our conversation. Why kindness?
I think kindness is very critical to be able to build a brand. I'm heavily inspired by Mr. Ratan Tata ji. So, I think a lot of these people back in the day had kindness at the core of them as people. And we are people, we are not machines, right? We still have like an entire world outside. So I think kindness is the way. Kindness is the only way like for me, right? So whether it is handling your team, whether it is handling only when you have kindness and empathy for your customers, can you build something that you will not be cutting corners with or you will not be making excuses for, right? So kindness does not mean only kindness. I think it's broadly like empathy for everybody around you.
Makes sense. One book that you recommend to every entrepreneur.
The hard thing about hard things is one ikigai actually. Sorry, I'll take that back. Ikigai.
Yeah, we can recommend two books.
But Ikigai has been one of those books which was really, really something for me personally. Yeah.
Biggest mistake Indian startups make while raising funds.
Rushing into things is one of the things. You think that people owe you money, nobody owes you money. So, first get your action right, and only then will somebody give you money, right? Rushing into funding is like one of the most.
Yeah, yeah. When I tell a lot of startups that I interact with that it takes about 9 to 12 months to close your round, they're all shocked. And I'm like, okay, this is the average stats based information. This is the reality, right? So, yeah.
I think the shortest deal,
Uh,
Saujanya, I did was 100 days, 96, 97 days. That is the
that
shortest
was
in
a
my
big
entire
wow.
career. That is a big, I mean, that's why I remember it so
That's a
well. From
big
the day
wow.
that he
Yeah.
pitched to the day that he had money in his account was 97 days with proper diligence and everything, right? Nothing, we have not cut corners anywhere. But That was literally the only deal on the table, and the startup was one of the pushiest, most well negotiating guy that I have ever met in my life. And it was half him that we closed that transaction in 97 days. But typically, every transaction that I have worked with has been around 4 to 6 months at least. I think the longest was more than 12 months. Yeah.
That is typically the range that I've seen also. Yeah, makes sense. But 100 days is like really wow.
100 days is something. Yeah.
It's something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Today I see a lot of family businesses starting off incubators which are closing deals much faster. They are making
Yeah.
decisions in 4 weeks, 6 weeks. So
Yeah.
that is one space probably for the startups
That is
listening in.
super exciting. The family office space is
Yeah.
super exciting space. Yeah.
Correct, correct. And one last question. If you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
I would have been a singer or an actor.
Ah, singer. Wow. See, this question always gives me good, surprising answers. I didn't know this side of you at all, Vinita.
Yeah, yeah. Come to Lotus. So we'll sing together.
Yeah. Superb. Yes, that is pending. So, one takeaway for the audience today in terms of what is that one action point you want them to take it back with them from this conversation?
If you're an entrepreneur, please don't concentrate on fundraising. Concentrate on building a great team, building your compliances in place, and then fundraising will happen. It is a byproduct. It's not why you're building your company. Of course, funding office is built to support you on that. But please understand that building a startup is much more than fundraising.
Beautiful. Lovely conversation, Vinita. Thank you so much. Audience who are listening in, make sure that you visit Lotus, you take part in funding office. This is one curated place that will save you a lot of energy, heartburn, and money all in one place.
Thank you so
Superb
much,
talking to
Saujanya.
you, Vinita. Thank you so much.
Lovely
And
conversation.
look forward to our conversation on
Absolutely.
women entrepreneurship some other
Absolutely.
time.
All geared up for that. Thank you so much, Saujanya.
Bye.